We say things like, maybe later, perhaps another time, or I'll see you tomorrow. But for some of us, there won't be a tomorrow. Listen as your worst nightmares come to life. These nightmares have become someone's reality. My name is Justin Crowley, and this is The Murder Project. Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 22 of The Murder Project. In this episode, we're going to be doing the debrief over the Nikki Addimando case. Was it murder or was it self-defense? That is the question that we're going to be trying to answer in this episode. If you're new to the podcast, the debrief is where I sit down with my good friend and former police officer, Mike Smith, to discuss the cases further. In the debrief, we'll discuss the cases from both sides of the aisles, theories that we might have, and anything we think needs a second look. The debrief is an unscripted and off-the-cuff commentary about the cases that we are currently covering. The hope of the debrief is to break the cases down further, but in a relaxed environment with the true crime that we love and also some laughter. So, let's get the episode started. My man, Mike Smith, in the house.
In the house.
How are you? Literally in my house.
Literally.
Get out
your
of my
kitchen.
house.
Wait, what? That's not how this works.
Get in my house.
Yep.
Now get out of my house.
In like an hour.
Yeah, I guess that'll work.
An hour and change, the way that we get going.
Sometimes, yeah, we start spinning and then it just keeps going.
It is a really nice day today.
It was.
Mm-hmm.
My allergies are killing me again.
Yes, actually I was a little concerned about that.
There's some sort of thing happening where I feel like Mother Nature is trying to kill me. Literally just trying to kill me.
It's either Mother Nature or Father Time trying to kill all of us, buddy.
That's exactly right. Whether it's cottonwood or just allergies out, the cottonwood kill me. Like the sun is your mortal enemy.
That's correct, yeah.
Because you're a ginger.
Full-blooded ginger.
And I mean, you already don't have a soul, but it's bad enough that the sun is just trying to take you down every single day. That's my cottonwood. Cottonwood trees will kill me.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah. I understand.
I stayed at my buddy's house one time, just a little sidebar, but stayed at my buddy's house one time out in the country, and there was a cottonwood tree above this little bunkhouse that we stayed in, and it was in full bloom. I woke up the next morning, and I really thought I was going to die. My wife we had to leave.
Wow.
We had to leave the property because I was dying.
That is a wicked bad allergy. Did you take anything for it?
No. No, I sure didn't. I didn't have anything with me.
Of course.
Whatever. Anyway. All right. So let's go ahead and dive into this one. This is going to be a pretty interesting case. I know that it's also, there's a lot of tragedy in this case because you have one person that lost their life, another person that's in prison, and then two kids without their mother or father at the time. Father permanently.
Right.
Mother in prison.
It is very unfortunate the family had to be torn apart like that. But the circumstances of this case are all unfortunate.
Yeah. So shout out again to April out in Michigan for sending us this case. Once we looked at it, we were like, yeah, we got to do this one.
Yeah, it is good.
We're going in full blast.
April, I hope you like the things we're about to say.
Yeah. I hope we do the case justice.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that because of the part one episode, we kind of got the backstory, but where I wanted to kind of dive into this thing, and I know that you and I both kind of talked about this before the podcast, but let's start when Nikki and Chris find out that they're pregnant. And also I want to mention in the previous episode, I forgot to mention that after Nikki started working at the nursery and her and Chris found out they were pregnant, sometime in between then is when she moved into his apartment. I think I breezed over that and kind of just went straight into.
So they weren't living together before?
So when they first started dating each other and she was working at the gymnastics facility with him, and then she quit working there and started working at a daycare or nursery.
Yeah.
And then they moved in with each other and then they got pregnant.
Oh,
and then so I kind of breezed over that. And I was going diving straight in for it.
Not
So,
a correction. You're just adding that additional detail.
True. That
was my confusion. I thought you were changing something, but you weren't.
Okay, that's fair enough. That's actually true. I think a good place for us to start is Nikki and Chris are living together. She finds out that she's pregnant. They know that money's going to be tight, but they decide that Nikki is going to stay home with the child. And I know this is sort of because we were in law enforcement and we are around this stuff a lot. And I know we say that a lot of times, but really that's our reference point. And there is a lot of instances where there's no former violence
or abuse
or
of
abuse,
any kind.
And it just all of a sudden I mean, to be honest, I mean, there has to be a starting point.
So
somewhere.
And everything that I read, I never found anything that would confirm that this was like an expected pregnancy.
No, I didn't see anything like that either.
I mean, for anybody, that's a shock.
Yeah, they're younger.
Right. There wasn't something that they were looking like they were planning on doing together.
Yeah.
It just kind of happened from what I've gathered. And if I'm wrong, somebody please, you can message us, let us know. But so yeah, they're just now living together. They're young, they're working, and then bam, she's like, "Oh, I'm pregnant." That's a huge life-changing event for anyone.
Absolutely. And they can say, someone could also say, well, Nikki decided she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom and Chris wasn't down with it, and then that started causing problems. Or they could have both agreed that, hey, money is going to be tight, but it'll be all good.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, it's not like childcare is cheap.
No, it's not.
No, it's not. It's scandalous.
Yeah.
How expensive it is.
Yeah. And so we get so they have the child, and of course, after a woman has a baby, there's a period of time where.
Yeah, I believe the minimum is 6 weeks.
Yeah, I believe that's what we're all told.
Yes.
I mean, if you've had kids and you're a guy, that's probably something that somebody's told you, where they're like, hey, you can't be doing anything like that in the bedroom for at least 6 weeks.
No intercourse for 6 weeks.
Yeah. And so this is when he tells Nikki, or what Nikki tells Family Support Services later, or however that worked out, that he told her that he, quote, had needs, and they needed to be met one way or the other. I think there's other ways to go around this, but...
yeah, that's pretty savage to say to somebody that you're in a long-term relationship with, and now the mother of your child.
Yeah.
And really does everything it can, that statement just by itself, to prove that stereotype about men.
Yeah. So Nikki says that after about 6 weeks after the baby was born, Chris says he has needs, and I guess she is going to probably tell him no, like this isn't going to happen.
Right. So
he decides that he is going to rape her. I mean, that's what he does. That's what she says that he does. There was an incident that happened where Chris struck her, and then he sexually assaulted her. And then that's where this whole thing starts.
Mm-hmm.
That's
the whole cycle of abuse is starting with the fact that he needs his needs met.
Yeah.
Yeah, disgusting.
And this is where we were talking about earlier, how we were going to kind of get into this. This is where you can have a 2-year dating relationship where everything is seemingly fine.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, something changes. So one of the things I wanted to talk about is, what was that change? And obviously it has, in my opinion, it's got to be the kid.
Yeah, that's very true. So, I mean, late term into the pregnancy, she's probably not feeling like she wants to have sex.
Yeah.
And she doesn't have to.
No.
She's creating a human.
Yeah.
That's pretty tough.
She's literally making a human.
Yeah, she's literally making a human. She's tired. Her body is doing backflips hormonally on the daily. And then, so post birth, now her body is recovering from one of the most severe traumas that humans can go through, that a female human can go through.
Yep.
And she's definitely not feeling like she wants to have sex. And that is also her right.
Yep.
Because it's her body. And even though they're in a relationship, that doesn't mean he has any stake to the damn thing.
No.
But he doesn't see it that way.
Nope.
And so he starts to become frustrated and takes it out on her physically, which is terrible and disgusting, and nobody should do something like that. It just goes to show how selfish of a person that he was to demand something like that from her. And now, on top of that, there's also a baby in the household.
Mm-hmm.
That is a huge level of stress.
And I one of the things that I thought was that I was thinking about whenever I was going over this is, I wonder if there was ever a time where Chris had been violent with anybody else, because from what I understand from the people that take Chris's side in this whole deal, you know, kind of the justice for Chris folks, he never had any other instances where something like this happened. So I don't know if this is something that he was keeping hidden inside him, or if this was one of those instances where when he struck Nikki and then sexually assaulted her, it just kind of opened up Pandora's box.
I think it's kind of both. He probably didn't have that going on in his life. He didn't feel like that something like this hadn't happened to him before. And so he had no reason to feel that way. They were probably, everything was smooth sailing, but having a child changes the life of the mother and father greatly.
Yeah. And there were from what I understand, Nikki did not document any of this. She didn't go to the police. She didn't go to family support services. And that's where I kind of was talking about in the part 1, where I think she was hoping that this was going to be a one-time incident where it was like, he got angry, something happened. And a lot of times you'll hear where, I mean, it's in every single movie, I think, where there's some sort of family violence, where the guy's like, oh, baby, I'll never do it again.
Right.
You know, that's actually real. I mean, and guys say that all the time.
Yeah, it's a really terrible stereotype.
Yeah.
Cliche, I guess, is a better term for things like this to happen. But that says a lot for her character. Now, it wasn't right that happened, but she was like, you know what? I'm going to tough this out. Maybe he didn't mean it. Maybe it was going to happen only one time, and she thought she was going to deal with it. And that says a lot about her, because it obviously snowballed into much worse. But, I mean, she didn't want to.
She was going to see it through. Yeah.
Right, yeah. She was going to try to tough it out.
Yeah, and so let's fast forward to the next year. It's 2014, and Nikki gets pregnant again with their second child. And I guess in this second pregnancy, things escalate further. And I didn't find any information saying where, a lot of the incidences that happened with her while she was pregnant with her second child happened while she was in between the two pregnancies.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that happened is that she went into the hospital, and Chris had bit her on the shoulder and slammed her face into the counter twice, and then he sexually assaulted her again. And so at this point, Nikki actually has an outcry. This is her first outcry.
Right.
And a lot of things are happening to her, and that's why I said in the first episode, I'm like, this is all happening while she's pregnant.
Right.
And this, I think, speaks to the fact that at this point, if all this information is true and correct, and I know I've said that several times, but we have to keep pointing that out, because
that's right.
If the information is true and correct, then he does not care at all about Nikki or the kids or anything that is happening to her while she's pregnant. All of this is gone.
Right, yeah. He just wants to satisfy himself.
Yep. So she goes to family support services, and they tell her that she needs to file a police report. And this is one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, Mike, is because one of the sad things in any sort of family violence situation is whenever you get hung up in paperwork or you get caught between agencies and it seems like nobody is doing much. And a lot of people say, like, hey, she went to family support services. They told her to go make a police report. Y'all dropped the ball.
Right.
But there is a lot of legality that it ties up in this, and you were talking about that before we got the show started.
Mm-hmm.
About, well, what happens if you don't have a victim? We've talked about this in other podcasts.
That's true, yeah. I mean, most crimes, when you're talking about viewing them legally and presenting cases and making a case, you have to have a victim. And in assault cases of any kind, the victim is normally the person that the assault happened to. In cases like about drugs and paraphernalia and like things like graffiti and stuff like that, that's why the victim is normally society.
Yeah.
Like the city itself or the county or something like that. That's how they classify it, because it's a requirement. You have to have a victim to have a crime. And so, did she go and make that police report?
No.
Right. And that's very unfortunate, because in any government, the wheels of bureaucracy are very slow. Things have to be filed, things have to be put into systems, they have to be followed up on, so on and so forth. But still, she chose not to do that for whatever reason. That pretty much put a stop to the flow of that investigation.
Yeah, because
it was not going to go any further.
No, because you have to look at it from this point of view. The police get a report that this is happening from, say, family support services. They go and talk to Nikki and say, hey, is all of this information true? Yes, it is. All of this information is true.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we need you to fill out a witness affidavit and basically swear to this that all of this is true. And if it gets to the point where Chris goes to trial, we need you to testify against him if that's possible. Now, I know in certain circumstances they could possibly exclude the victim as long as they have all of her information, her documentation saying that all of this information is true and correct. But imagine going to a grand jury and then telling them, we have a case against this guy for assault family violence. Okay. Do you have any photos? Do you have any witness affidavits? Do you have anybody willing to testify? Do we have anything to go to trial on? No.
Yeah.
What are they going to do?
Right. There's nothing they can do. There's no meat and potatoes to the case, and so it's not even going to be presented.
Yeah. And like you said, the wheels of justice turn slowly. And in a situation like this where the courts are already overburdened with cases, this is one of those ones that unfortunately it gets tossed to the side just to say, I mean, it sounds bad, but
it does. There's really no way to say that the lack of follow-up is what cost that case.
Yeah.
To the fact that it was never followed up on is a reason why it never went forward, because you say something like that and then people start thinking you're victim blaming, which I'm not. Her reasons are her reasons. We're just saying that how you would get around that is by following up with what the bureaucracy of government requires. If you go to Family Support Services and you make an outcry for assault from a family member, regardless of what type of assault it is, you're gonna need to make a police report. And that doesn't just go for assault, that goes for any crime.
Yeah.
If somebody breaks into your car and you tell your insurance, the first thing the insurance is gonna ask is,
Did you make a police report?
And if you did, what's the case number?
Yeah.
It's just the way it is. You have to get the ball rolling by contacting the police.
Yeah. And we also, when Mike was saying earlier, we're not victim blaming, we also know that in situations like this, the victim can also have been threatened after the violence happened. So they can say, if you go to the police with this, I'll kill you.
Yeah.
Or if you go to the police with this, I'll ruin your life. I have no criminal record. No one's going to believe me.
Yeah, that's a big one.
I have a solid reputation at work. I have a solid foundation around me. I will take these kids and you will have nothing.
And
you believe what you believe.
Absolutely. Perception is reality to the individual. She had no reason to believe that if those things were said, that they wouldn't be true. And in fact, we'll find out later that she would say that he had threatened her several times, saying that he would kill her if she left him.
Yep.
So,
also, what would you say if he's like, hey, not only am I going to kill you, but I'm going to kill the kids?
Exactly. I mean,
you would do anything you could to make sure that the kids were safe.
Absolutely.
And I have seen several times where a woman has stayed in a relationship to try to protect her kids when she is being assaulted by her live-in partner.
That's right. And it's just that's how the cycle of abuse perpetuates. That's what these aggressors target. They need to feel like they have the power, and they'll take it any way they can. And they're going to go ahead and close that loop to make sure they keep their status quo by threatening everything that matters to that person. Not just their life in this case, but also maybe even their children's lives, because ultimately that person is selfish and a bully.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And so just a couple weeks after this instance where Nikki goes to the hospital, makes a report, several weeks later, there's another instance that happens where in this one, Nikki goes into the hospital and she makes a report in the hospital. And the good thing about this one is that the staff was able to document that she was nervous. She was whispering a lot whenever they were talking to her. She had poor eye contact. She was shaking. Nikki had bite marks on her again, and she had burns to her breast, her thighs, and her genitals. And what she said is these burns came from Chris lighting a spoon and heating it up and pressing the spoon against her skin.
Good Lord. And
if you look at, there is a website called We Stand With Nikki, and it's https://westandwithnikki.com, and there's some pictures of her wounds on that website so that you can actually look at them and say, okay, these are real. And we looked at the photos before we started it, and some of them seem like you really got to hit somebody pretty hard.
She does have one of the bruises to her right cheek. You'd have to hit somebody with significant force to make a bruise that lasted, and it's that red and puffy.
Yeah, and one of the things that we were looking at while we're checking the photos out was the consistency about what side of the body that her injuries were common, and it was her right side. Her burn marks, she had one burn mark on her right shoulder. She had that huge bruise across her right cheek, and this would tell me, if I was looking at it, I don't know if Chris was right or left-handed. I would assume he's right-handed because he's using his right hand to strike her. He's using his right hand to burn her with the spoon. So if all of these things are accurate, then that looks like he was striking her just as someone would. And what I mean by that is that she did not do the burns or the bruising herself. And so it would seem to me that unless Nikki was also left-handed, this would be information that would be pertinent if we were actually investigating this case, which we're not. But if Nikki was left-handed, okay, then she could do it. But if they're both right-handed, you have a really good case to say, okay, this looks legit to me, because she would have to be using her left hand, or then you would have to say she's bringing someone in, a friend or a family member, to strike her. But what would be, and this is one of the things I wanted to talk about later, but I think this is as good a time as ever. What would be the purpose of that?
Right.
What would be the purpose of her making up all of this information over years?
Years, yeah.
Not over a couple of months. Not she got mad because she heard Chris was cheating on her with some chick at the gym. No, it's years.
Right. And I mean, it just goes to show that she was trying to hang in there and do what she thought was right by her and her children. And he relied on that.
Yeah.
And obviously his streak of violence gained some momentum. I mean, heating up a spoon to burn somebody. I mean, where do you even begin to think that up?
Yeah.
The only reason you would do that is to hurt somebody.
Yeah.
Then you'd have to make them stay put, heat the spoon up with like a lighter, or I don't know, an oven burner, or however he chose to do it, candle flame, who knows, and then
hold her down
and do it. Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, the only reason you would do that is for some type of personal satisfaction.
Yeah, and then why would he? And that was the thing. It's like the shoulder, the breast, the thighs, and the genitals. It's almost like he is doing things to her that he A, knows cause pain, and B, also humiliates her.
Absolutely.
Like if she has to go into the hospital, if she has to tell anybody this, she has to show her most intimate areas to strangers.
Right.
To be able to prove that this happened to her.
Exactly.
And sometimes that's some of the psychology that goes into that.
Yeah, and for most of the places where these injuries occurred, they're not places that the average person is going to see when she's dressed and walking around.
Also a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
These are all areas that are covered.
That's right. And, of course, they're very sensitive. That goes without saying.
Yep.
I think burning somebody with a spoon anywhere is bad, but especially in those areas. And it's not a place people are going to see. And it's something that she has to be embarrassed about to go report, which, according to what they say at the hospital, that's
true.
That's exactly what she felt.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So in 2015, fast forwarding a little bit more, she has her second child, and this is, and she also did not report that last event to the police. Family Support Services found out about it with the burns and everything, but that was not made into a formal police report.
Yeah, so none of these have been so far.
So far, none of them have made it.
I mean, that really is upsetting because there are protocols in place at hospitals and these family support services that are supposed to create a trail of paperwork. But even in my limited experience, I know that the next step is somebody has to tell the police. And if it isn't the victim, it's not going to create a lot of momentum for that case.
We go back into the circle that we were just talking about.
Exactly.
We're back in there just circling the drain, waiting for something terrible to happen, in which case something does. But after their second child is born, this is when Nikki stated that Chris started videotaping himself raping her and then posting these videos to Pornhub. And as I mentioned in the part one, later on detectives were able to confirm that this did actually happen. So this is another level of escalation.
Yeah, and
humiliation.
Also. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah. I mean, I haven't seen these videos and I don't want to.
I'm not going to look them up.
But I wish there was, there's really no right way to say, like, what did they see in there that helped them prove that the videos were like against her will
of
and
a
stuff.
Sexual assault nature,
right? Yeah, and that's horrible to say. I feel gross even saying it, but you do have to think about those types of things, like what occurred in the video
to show that this was actually
a sexual assault and not consensual.
And then you also have to consider that in a event of a trial or something like that, they could possibly spin this into some sort of role play type scenario, which is gross, but I understand people try to use certain things. And when you get to trial, and we'll talk about this later, when you get to trial, you'll do anything.
Yes.
Both sides would do anything.
And unfortunately, that's their job.
Yeah. So after this, Nikki went back and spoke to representatives with Family Support Services, and they gave her a risk assessment. And this was one of those things I talked about. And they said she was in the highest category of being killed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that would make sense. Continuing escalation of violence, going from not just striking and sexual assault in nature, but then now using tools to increase the violence, threats, the humiliation of creating these sex videos.
Yep. And then Family Support Services also knows that there is a weapon in the house.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're looking at this from a risk assessment kind of trajectory, the next step is Nikki dies.
That's right. Like intense violence, whether it's by hand or by firearm, by a blunt instrument. That's just the way it works. This is all based on statistics and examples from other cases that are collected nationwide by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. That's where these statistics come from. And it's more often than not, it's correct.
Yeah. So later on in 2015, Family Support Services decide to make a outcry on Nikki's behalf. And I think what we're looking at in a situation like this is the continuation of her coming in with these injuries, the risk assessment, and they're saying, okay, we have to try to do something. And one of these times, hopefully, is going to be the time that Nikki follows through and makes the affidavit
that's
against
the most,
Chris.
Right. That's the most you can hope for.
So Nikki goes and talks with Family Support Services again. They reach out to the police. A police detective contacts Nikki, and this is whenever he figures out that the videos on Pornhub and all of that was correct. And he basically, from what I understand, he draws up the case and gets it ready so that he goes to her and says, hey, listen, we got this thing ready to go.
Right.
All we need is your witness affidavit. That's all we need. And she says no. Right.
And there are a lot of reasons why she probably did that, and they're all just unfortunate. She probably felt trapped. He had, who knows what other threats that had occurred that we don't get to hear about. So, of course, that is going to fall under speculation. But I'm going to go ahead and say that I believe that was probably happening.
Yep. So after this, things kind of quiet down on the Family Support Services front. And I'm sure that she probably got into an area where she didn't feel like if she wasn't going to have the follow through, that she wasn't going to go back and report these things. So 2016 and most of 2017 were kind of, there was not a lot of information given about the things that were going on. I think anybody would be a fool to think that if indeed these things are true and correct, any of that violence stopped. I think that would be.
Well, it does happen that if the aggressor knows that there's going to be heat, then they'll go ahead and step back. Right. They're going to calm down.
That's true.
That's very possible.
You go into like a second honeymoon period.
Yeah. He found out and he's like, ooh, man, I better cool my jets. And so he tried. I'm not saying he tried anything. I'm just saying that is something that could have happened. He might have found out one way or the other that this was something that was happening. And so he decided to, back off a little bit to try to drop suspicion.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you would be, if that is indeed what happened, we've seen that happen several times. Absolutely, where there are kind of lulls in. So I think it could go either way.
Mm-hmm.
It could go the fact that the abuse continued or it actually did stop. But in September of 2017, Nikki and Chris got a call from Family Support Services saying that they wanted to interview the children. In my opinion, what I kind of think happened is, people talk amongst agencies. When you have people in law enforcement that kind of work alongside with people in CPS,
Mm-hmm.
Family Support Services, like here in Amarillo, we have the Bridge,
Yep.
where they do a lot of all these people hang out not necessarily hang out, but work related hang out. They see each other, and someone could have brought something up. And in this situation, I'm not sure how that all unfolded, but CPS wanted to do a interview with Chris and Nikki to see if they could figure out kind of what was going on in the household. So they call them on September 26th and say that they want to have an interview with them. And then this is where I brought up that, of course, in any interview situation, you separate the two.
Right.
Because you don't want any intimidation from one side or the other.
Absolutely, yeah.
And you want to make sure that the story you get from the person can be as true as you hope it can be.
Exactly.
If you have someone that is scared to make a statement, like obviously Nikki has been,
oh yeah,
you might not get the information that you need. But also what they're hoping for is in a situation like this, hopefully this is the time that she says, all of this is happening to me. They're still holding on to that, I think.
Right. And I definitely think a lot of that goes back to that risk assessment, because that thing doesn't go away.
Yep.
That gets filed into the state, and it's permanent. So it's not like you can make a risk assessment like that, at least I hope not, and then it just goes away. They're like, oh, yeah, we made this risk assessment where more than likely something terrible is going to happen to you. But if you don't want to do anything, that's fine. We can just save it.
Yeah, there's not someone in the back searching obituaries like, nah, she's not dead yet.
Exactly.
Yeah,
No, it's...
I mean, God, I hope it's not like that.
Yeah, of course not. But, I mean, that doesn't go away. So, I mean, there's more than likely a system in place that asks for follow-up. And somebody, even though I'm sure it's a highly overburdened system, most things in government are, and that it still comes up. And we're seeing that it does. It doesn't go away.
No.
So they want to do the interview. Did they want to talk to the children?
So the next day they show up at the house or the apartment. Mm-hmm. I keep saying house, it's an apartment, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
They show up at the apartment. They talk to Nikki and Chris. I did not find any information on whether or not they talked to the children. And so in my mind, I was thinking possibly the reason that... So they call them on the 26th and say they're coming over. They talk to them on the 27th.
Mm-hmm.
And then the incident that takes place is in the early morning hours of the 28th. So just a few hours later. So I was wondering if they went over there and talked to Nikki and Chris. And from what I understand, they did not get any information that would help them by way of figuring out if these domestic violence acts were true or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I wondered is how, like, when we would set up something like this, you would coordinate it with the Bridge, and then if they weren't able to immediately interview the children, they would schedule a time for a later date, but soon.
Right.
I was thinking maybe in my head, the way that it was going in my head was maybe they went and talked to him and said, okay, tomorrow I need y'all to get the kids and y'all meet us down at such and such place.
And these kids, they're still very, very young.
Yeah, I think, golly, I hate to guess, but I want to say at this time they were 7 and 5, maybe.
Yeah.
Something like that,
So,
or maybe 5 and 3.
You can garner some information from interviewing the children, and it'd be a really great step. But it's not something that's guaranteed. It's a very sensitive procedure.
Yeah, and you only get to do it once, or they want to make sure that they get every bit of information they can get in one shot. Mm-hmm. They don't want to keep bringing the kids in to interview them because this is all trauma. Later on, this all comes back as trauma to the children, so they want to do it in like a one shot.
Yeah, but I'm also going back real quick. They came to the house, they talked to Nikki and Chris, and they don't get anything.
Nope.
I'm going to assume that he denied any of that.
I would agree.
And this was probably very uncomfortable for her.
Yep.
And so she didn't give them anything else, or maybe there wasn't anything at the moment to give that she didn't already report. We don't know. There's actually not a lot of information available that we could find on that. But they're saying the investigation is saying that they didn't get anything else from that.
Right. And she could have been like, hey, I already told y'all what I needed to say.
Yeah. I mean, who knows what was said, but they're saying that they didn't get any additional information from this.
But what we do know from family and friends is that after CPS left, they went ahead and started making phone calls to say, hey, if CPS calls y'all, let them know everything over at this house is good.
Yeah, and that's not too suspicious, but it is a little shady.
Yeah.
To start calling people and be like, hey, everything's good over here. So if they call and ask you, you tell them nothing's happening.
Yeah. And you could get the people on the phone like, nothing is happening, and they're like, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
This is what I'm saying. Like, somebody must have called and said something. Like, somebody's trying to do something to us, or whatever the scenario is. But someone's trying to get us. Mm-hmm. So don't let them get us.
That's right.
And you have these loyalties between family and friends, and you try to tap into those loyalties whenever something like this comes up. And I think that Chris might have been the one that was calling the majority of the people, possibly, or he could have told Nikki, like, hey, you better call and get this squared away.
I'm sure he did both.
And then that's where I want to go into. So the reason I think that something was coming soon is because I think that after CPS left, or Family Support Services, whichever one or both that were there, he was probably like, what in the F are you telling people? Why are these people at our house?
Yeah.
What did you say? What did you do? And then all of this starts circling back.
Right. I'm sure he was probably enraged.
Yeah.
I mean, this is calling into question his character. Neighbors saw these people go there. Now they're talking about speaking to other members of family and friends. And
normally in visits like this, they do bring a police officer or a deputy or something like that. And guess what? No one finds a parking spot. They're all parking up front.
Yep.
So everyone in the apartment complex sees everyone parking up front. Everybody's probably got unmarked cruisers. There's police cars out there.
Yeah.
And then they're walking up to their apartment.
Right. And so I'm sure that sent Chris into a rage.
Yeah.
Because he's like, now these people are at our house. What have you been saying to people? I told you not to do that. Or who knows what he was saying. But obviously, they started reaching out to people and being like, hey, you tell everyone we're good.
Yep.
Even though we'll find out later that a lot of people knew it wasn't all good.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's the main part of this. And so let's go ahead and get into that, because I think we could spend a little bit of time here. So that night, and we'll just go through what Nikki says happened.
Yes.
And then we can break this apart, because I think there's definitely some things we need to focus on. Nikki says that after the CPS investigators left, it was a normal night.
Mm-hmm.
They had consensual sex. The kids are in bed. They are asleep on the couch together in each other's arms.
Mm-hmm.
And they fall asleep. Later on, Nikki wakes up, and she says when she wakes up, she accidentally wakes Chris up. When Chris wakes up, for some reason, he produces a handgun that he had stuffed in his couch cushion, and a struggle ensues. Nikki knees him and then hits his arm. Whenever she strikes his arm, the gun falls to the floor. She gains control of the weapon, and this is when Chris supposedly starts mocking her, telling her that she can't do it or she wouldn't do it. Then he tells her that once he gets the gun back, he's going to kill her and then commit suicide. This is when Nikki decides that she, quote, lunges at him and pulls the trigger.
Right.
So at this point, you would think that they were standing, and that'll be important later.
Yes.
But for whatever reason, after the shot goes out, Nikki drops the gun on the floor and goes back and gets her children, loads them up into her car, and then leaves. And this is whenever she's later seen at a traffic light. The light's green. There's a cop behind her, so he honks his horn.
Do we know how much time had passed?
That's a good question.
Right,
And I don't know.
I was wondering if maybe you found something like that, because I did not.
No, and whenever she said that this altercation took place in the early morning hours and it was only 2 a.m. when the police officer came across her, I was making an assumption thinking that it was probably pretty quick after.
Right.
Like there wasn't a whole lot of downtime. The apartment wasn't cleaned up. one thing I thought was interesting was that somehow the laptops in their house ended up in the bathtub. But so there was some sort of things that were happening, and then also later on in the trial, it would come out. And I didn't touch too much on this in the part 1 because I knew we were going to do it here. But they said that on Chris's cell phone, there were searches for things like where to shoot someone in the head so that they die quickly, how to kill somebody, things like this. Searches in nature of committing murder
on his phone.
On his phone. And even they said that the pronouns used in the search were her. Like, how do you shoot her? How do you shoot? So the perception is that Chris was looking these things up on his phone, and then afterwards he deleted them, but they found them later.
Okay, and the laptops and stuff in the tub, were they ruined?
Yes.
So they were destroyed?
Yeah.
Like they tried to destroy the electronics?
Yeah. And this to me kind of looks, I don't know, I was trying to figure this out from a perspective of, is Nikki doing these things or is Chris doing these things? But we can get into that when we do the trial part.
Yeah.
So Nikki gets arrested, and originally, the cop, she tells the cop, hey, I shot my boyfriend and he's dead. He's at the apartment. So they take her into custody and they send.
Do we know, real quick, do we know where she was going?
No, so that I don't know that either.
Would show it.
I would assume maybe taking the kids to her mom's house.
Yeah. See, I was wondering if maybe, because I didn't really find anything on that. Was she going to a police station? Was she going to a family's residence? But she doesn't go anywhere. She just stops at a traffic light. It turns green. She doesn't move. There's a cop behind her.
Yep.
He stops her, and then she's like, "Oh, here's my chance to tell him." Maybe, I don't know. And I guess there isn't a lot of information on how to figure out what exactly was going on. But I can imagine that she was spinning anyway.
Yeah, I was going to say, she's probably just spinning in the car like, oh my gosh, what just happened?
Right.
Everything, no matter which side of the fence you fall on, whether or not this was murder or self-defense, but she still committed the act.
Right.
So she knows while she's sitting in that car, one way or the other, that she just shot her boyfriend and her children's father in the face.
That's right.
And so she's probably trying to deal with that. But when they find Chris, and this is where we'll kind of start getting into the details of the case, or into the murder or self-defense, whichever you choose. But I feel like I got to keep saying that because I don't want someone to be like,
yeah, I know,
but you over there choosing sides.
It is hard to stay.
Yeah. So when they get over to the apartment, they find Chris. He's laying on the couch. He's got one arm down to his side, one arm over his chest, and his eyes are open.
Mm-hmm.
And he has a gunshot wound to his head. And this is where I think things start falling apart as far as Nikki's intended self-defense goes, because she tells the cops the story, the one that I just told you guys.
Right, that there was a struggle.
That there was a struggle and everything was happening. And when they get over to the house, they're thinking this guy's probably going to be laying on the floor or something. Right. But he's not. He looks like he's resting on the couch.
Mm-hmm.
And I know some people have said that Nikki said that, or they're trying to say that Chris was asleep, and then people talk about no, because he had his eyes open. And I mean, to be honest with you, whether you're laying on the couch snoozing or you have your eyes open, when someone presses a gun against your forehead and you wake up, your eyes are going to be open.
Well, biologically, at the moment of death, someone's eyes can open.
Yeah.
Just because
your reflex can.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not even anything you can control. So, I mean, yeah, if you want to be like, but his eyes were open. Okay. But that can happen.
Yeah.
Even if he was schnoozing and he gets dome-pieced on the couch, his eyes can jump open. And that's pretty common. So if you're laying on the hospital bed in a coma and die, your eyes can just open. It's just a biological thing that happens at the moment of death.
Yeah. After they find this sort of kind of this initial evidence, they go ahead and charge Nikki with second-degree murder.
Mm-hmm.
First and second-degree manslaughter, and then first-degree criminal possession of a firearm.
Right, because she can't have... It's not her gun.
Right, and then
she used it in a violent offense.
Yeah, she used it while she was committing a crime, so then they can tack on the charge with that. It's kind of like in it's kind of like in Texas that you can have a firearm in your vehicle at any time. Well, now Texas is an open carry state.
That's right.
Previous to that, you could have a weapon in your vehicle because your vehicle was considered part of the castle doctrine, like it's your home, it's your property. But if you were pulled over for, say, a traffic violation, that's fine. But if you were pulled over for, say, DWI, then you get the DWI, but now you're in commission of another crime, so you get the possession of a firearm.
Right. And you mentioned in the first episode that they hit her with several different forms of homicide, the manslaughters and the second-degree murder. And for people wondering why they do that, it's just like what he said. They hit you with the book so that they can, whenever they filter out the elements of the offense, they'll have that charge already on there. They can focus down to the appropriate charge. It's very common practice.
Yeah, the judge can instruct the jury that they may choose to convict her on the first or second degree manslaughter if they don't feel like the evidence is there for the second degree murder.
Yeah, but one of the worst things has already happened. So now he's dead. She's in custody. Those kids have to be uprooted and not have either parent and be taken to family members or another caretaker.
Yep.
Now, for sure, CPS is involved because they're the ones that have the burden of figuring out where those children are going to go and have a paper trail connecting to the case of what they did with the children. Now, that's not the point of what we're talking about right now, but that is probably what happened. So just another part of how the bureaucracy works.
Yeah. When they get ready to go to trial, like I mentioned in part 1, each side is going to say that the other one is wrong. And so Nikki's going with a affirmative defense that she was the victim of sexual violence. She was beaten, all the things that we spoke about. And then the DA's office is going to say, no, this isn't true because Chris is a good guy and we don't have any information saying otherwise. And I know some people are probably thinking about the evidence from family support services and all of that. But one of the tricky things with this is because Nikki never made any formal statements.
Right, with the police.
A lot of this information the judge could have said that a lot of this information can't be used.
That's true. I don't think that is what happened.
No, I'm saying, yeah, it could.
Yeah, but it could. You're right. And you'll hear about a lot of cases where they do say that. Like the judge will tell the jury that you can't take this into consideration.
Yep. So Nikki's defense is she is a survivor and she had to take matters into her own hands. The DA's office is saying that Nikki murdered him, and one of the interesting things that I found, so not only was Chris laying on the couch with his arm down to his side and the other arm over his chest, but they found the slug to the pistol in the cushion to the pillow that his head was laying against. And so this is where I think Nikki should have, I think honestly that he probably was laying on the couch. I've seen enough crime scenes to know that he's not going to fall on the couch like that. Yeah,
they had it documented as a hard contact wound. And what that means is that with the evidence available on his remains, that it appeared the barrel was pressed to his head before being fired.
Yeah, and with him still laying on this couch, he's not going to drop in a position like that. And so Nikki, I believe that had suffered. All of the things that she said in my mind, I believe are true. I think that, because like we said earlier, what's the long game here? If you're going to say that Chris is doing all of these things to you and it's not real, what would be the purpose of her saying these things and it not being true?
Right.
There's no point for her to say this and it not be true. She's not going to get some huge payout.
Right.
There's not some huge life insurance plan that's, getting ready to dump hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars into her lap. She has, from what we understand, been going through severe violence for the last 6 to 7 years.
Yep.
And it all kind of culminated to this one event where, in my mind, I feel like after CPS showed up to the house, things got real. And Chris probably made threats against her and her children.
Yeah, I believe specifically that's where the threat I mentioned earlier came up. I believe she said that this was when he told her that if she left him, he would kill her.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she has no reason to not believe that's true.
Yeah, he's got the gun. He probably, let's say in a kind of make-believe scenario here, he goes and gets the gun and shows her.
Mm-hmm.
I got the gun. I can do it. And I think for the DA's office, they're saying that she had every opportunity to leave the house, that she didn't have to do what she did. And in my mind, I think that Nikki was in the calm of the storm.
That's right.
The DA's office saying, well, all you got to do is go get your stuff and go.
Yeah.
No, it's not that easy.
Certainly not.
In Nikki's situation, it's not that easy. She has to think about her kids. He's sleeping on the couch. She can't go pack her kids up and get out an apartment while he's sleeping 3 feet away from the front door.
Right. And he's not in his bed.
No, he's in the living room.
Right, where there's gonna be noise. You don't wake up 2 young children in the middle of the night, pack up your things and a bag for each of the kids, and head out the door while he's just snoozing away on the couch. He's going to wake up.
And he could.
And Lord knows what's going to happen when he does see something like that. And that's not a risk. In my opinion, she was willing to take. This was it. She was in the calm. She had every advantage over him that she does not have when he's awake.
Yeah. And I think in my mind, what if he was sleeping on the couch purposefully?
I was getting to that, yeah. So that if she tried to leave, he would wake up.
Yep.
Because it's an apartment, so the front door more than likely is right in the common area.
Yeah.
So there's no way she's going to be able to leave.
Yeah, she can't get out. So in my opinion, she makes a decision that this is it. This is her way out. Now, what I think she did wrong was make up the instances that took place. The struggle and all that. Because I'm not saying that she's wrong. What I'm saying is that I think she made up the story about the struggle and everything that happened to try to make it look like she was defending herself at the time, because maybe she thought, well, if I just shoot this dude in the head, no one's going to believe me, which has shown to be true, because there's a ton of people out there, including a district attorney's office, that said, no, you could have left.
Right.
So every fear that she had leading up to this point was real. And I think she made an error when she told them that there was a struggle and that she had to shoot Chris, because the evidence flat out doesn't support that.
Right, yeah. I mean, he's laying in a neutral position, looking like he's resting on the couch, which I believe he was, and he's got a hard contact wound where she pressed the pistol to his skull before pulling the trigger. And can that happen in a struggle? Sure, but the evidence doesn't support that. If she kneed him with enough force to knock him away or down, there would be proof of that. There is none.
Yeah.
And so I agree that she probably thought she was doing the right thing by saying that they fought first, making it seem more logical, I guess, in a way. But I think you're right. If she'd have just in the truth of the matter is that she had a chance to end that cycle of abuse, and she took it, but then, of course, decided to make up these facts of the struggle, and that's going to cast a lot of doubt about her honesty, and because none of the evidence supports that. So in court, and it does happen, they're going to call all of that into question, and in turn, it calls all of your credibility into question.
Yeah. Yeah, and in that's where I think she made the mistake. I believe, like we said, I think Mike and I both believe that all of the things that she said were happening to her were happening to her. The error that she made was this story, because just like Mike said, they're going to use this evidence against her, and it worked. It worked in the way that they say that she could have left the house. We both know, and I think people listening know, that's probably not a possibility.
No, in a perfect world, yeah, you could just do that.
But then going back and saying that he had searches on his phone that he was looking up ways to kill her. Conveniently, the night that she also kills him. The laptops end up in the bathtub.
Yeah.
And
was any data recovered? Or
from what I looked to see if I can find that, and what I found, what information I found is that they were not able to recover any data from the laptops.
I mean, because water will do that.
Yeah.
I mean, that hard drive is scrap.
Yeah, and I don't know what was on those hard drives. It'd be hard for me to speculate, but
and to be honest, I don't think we'll ever know, and that's probably by design.
Yeah, and so how did those laptops end up in the bathtub? Mm-hmm. If this is all part of Chris's plans, he throws the laptops in the bathtub before he goes. I mean, they're both laying on the couch. So
if they even were.
Yeah, well, I mean, from her story.
Oh, yeah.
They're laying on the couch together. So how did the laptops end up in the bathtub?
Yeah, they don't. I don't really see where in the investigation she mentions that. The investigators find it there.
Yeah,
but I don't remember reading or seeing anywhere where she mentions it.
I don't either.
Right.
Yeah. So then you get to the point where they say, okay, well, because you ran with this story,
mm-hmm.
now a jury actually believes that she was the one that was in the wrong.
Mm-hmm.
That she's the one that murdered Chris, and they convict her of the second degree.
That's right.
The second degree murder. And after this, the family and friends of everybody's thinking, okay, well, maybe there's a chance for her to be kind of included in sentencing after, because like I said, 3 weeks after her trial, Governor Cuomo, which is kind of, I brought that, I was like, boy, that's kind of odd that, that didn't age well for him.
No.
So they set up this Domestic Violence Survivors Justice Act
mm-hmm.
to say that if someone is found guilty of a crime where it was kind of this same situation where there's a pattern of abuse and things like that, then they can be given lighter sentences.
Mm-hmm.
So like on the second degree murder, it was 19 years to life. And I think they said she could have got anywhere from 5 to 15 years instead if she fell under this umbrella, which later on the judge said that she didn't. And I read off those 3 things in the part 1, but I think it'd be kind of interesting to kind of talk through those. The first one was the defendant had to be a victim of domestic violence at the time of the attack.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be hard to prove that.
Right.
Based off what she told the police.
Exactly.
If she would have went in there with the scenario and not gone with this and then said, no, after the CPS leaves, he told me he was going to kill me.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can say that she goes into that. If you go based off the story that she tells, I don't think she's in.
No, it casts a lot of doubt on her credibility.
Yep.
She's saying they struggled. There's no physical evidence of that.
Yeah. And from the physical evidence, it looks like Chris was just busting a snooze.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I'm not taking a side on that. But 2, domestic violence must have been a significant contributing factor to the defendant's participation in the offense.
Right.
I think you can get there.
Well, they can, but there's no police follow-up.
Yeah.
It's just with the family support services. And do I agree with that system in place? No, I've been waiting this whole time to talk about that. No, it's not a very good system.
No.
But it's a very serious charge to say somebody is being violent and abusive towards you, and there's only one institution in place to deal with that, and that is law enforcement.
Yeah.
And no matter how you feel about it getting reported or not getting reported, that system is in place for a reason. So you tell family support services you're being abused. We know that she was. They have photos. They talked with her, but there's no police report. And that is just such a huge thing that really went against her here, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And if there's a better way, I'm hoping we get there someday, but that's not something that's in place currently, and certainly not then.
Yeah, and that's sad, just on itself. So, and then 3, the defendant's sentence under current law would be unduly harsh.
Mm-hmm. And this qualifies, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But it all comes down to documentation, like I was just saying. And had she chosen to jump through those hoops, is how I'll refer to it, this would probably be a very different outcome. But at the time, it wasn't, and it's not.
Yeah. And I mean, it came out. So in July 14th of 2021, Nikki did actually, on one of her appeals, she got her sentence reduced to the second degree murder to 7.5 years, from 19 to life to 7.5 years, and on the possession of the firearm to 3.5 years. Because I don't think I pointed out in the part 1, but she actually received 15 years on that charge, and they were to run concurrently.
Right.
So she got 7.5 and 3.5 as a reduction for her sentence. And I think that one of the things that we should point out is, what are we considering? And when you look at what side of the fence you line on, what are we considering self-defense?
That is something I wanted to talk about. So when you say self-defense, it implies that something that's happening in the moment, the way that I see it. And legally, by definition, I believe that's also true. So if let's say that he attacked her and they did struggle over the gun and she ends up shooting him, that's self-defense. Just like if somebody came into your house and they were trying to take you out and you killed them or injured them in any way, it would be considered self-defense because there's an act happening currently that you're defending yourself from. So when you're looking at just a legal term, I don't think this qualifies.
Right.
Just by the legal term. Was she still defending herself to a degree and her children? Yes, but it's not self-defense the way it's written. Like he was attacking her in the moment, or made a threat and was going to retrieve a weapon, or gave her a timeline. Like, at this time, I'm going to kill you.
Yeah.
Right. And so
that's what I'm saying. Like, if she would have told the police the truth from the get-go and just said, the reason why I did this is because he's been beating me and sexually assaulting me for the last 7 years. Right. He keeps me in constant fear of my life. Those are good words to use.
That's exactly right.
He keeps me in constant fear of my life. I am afraid for my children. He told me that he was going to kill me. He fell asleep on the couch. And this is the only time I thought that I could get things done where I actually had the upper hand. And you know what? A jury probably would have agreed with her.
I do believe that.
It's when you spin it this other way, like you said, it starts casting a lot of doubt on what happened. And she's stuck to that story the whole time. And in my mind, I think that whenever she got the reduction in the sentence, that judge, the appeals judges, could see that might have been the situation and gave her a reduction in sentence. And I don't think that, in my personal opinion, I think that she's been in jail too long already.
I definitely agree with that. It's unfortunate. Did a homicide occur? Yes, but not without cause. I think it is reasonable to a degree that somebody who's lived under that much pressure and fear of violence and threats of death, it's completely reasonable that they're like, I don't see how this is going to end, so I'm going to end it for myself.
Yeah, and if anybody truly thought that this scenario if Nikki wouldn't have shot Chris that night, I think that not long after this, you would have just had this same scenario in the opposite roles.
Very good chance of that.
Nikki would have probably ended up dying in some time soon after all of this happened, if everything escalated the way it was going.
Right. I can't imagine finding out. I'm sure maybe she didn't know at the time, finding out later that he was searching for ways to kill somebody. It shouldn't be a common thing to Google how to shoot somebody in the head to kill them.
Yeah, unless that was her.
As also, that could be possible. Yeah. I don't think there's a way for them to prove that one way or the other.
No.
But it was on his phone.
Right.
And I understand it's very gray and all speculation. Yeah. Because there's no way to know the answer. But what we do know is she wasn't abusing him.
Right. Yeah, there was nothing going the other direction from what we know. And this is one of those things where, like you said, with the gray area, it is gray because you have people on Nikki's side that are saying, look at the evidence. There are pictures. There are all of these things. And then you have people on the Chris side, the Justice for Chris, saying he was a good dude. We never saw anything like this out of him. And I think it's important to point out that people can have a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde personality.
And many abusers do.
Yeah. Is it possible that Chris was this good guy in public and then a monster behind closed doors? Absolutely. If you only knew him in one of those ways, by what I mean by that is that he was a good guy, then you probably believe wholeheartedly that he was a good guy. I don't see how in this situation, how you could get to Nikki making this whole story up.
Mm-mm.
I'm not going to do that. I'm not even going to say or mention that that was a possibility. I honestly believe in my heart of hearts that this truly happened to her. Everything that she said truly happened. And you're going to have people that take Chris's side, and you're going to have people that take Nikki's side. That's pretty standard.
Mm-hmm.
And in my opinion, if what really happened that night would have come out sooner, I think we could have avoided this whole process.
Yeah, and I wish there was a better system in place, but abuse and people that abuse others in relationships like this, it's so intimate in all the wrong ways and private by design, and the only way you can get help is to broadcast it.
Yep.
And there's no real way to do that, unfortunately, without feeling scared, sheepish, embarrassed, and threatening. Even though you're doing the right thing, you're still threatening your lifestyle, the way that you live, your relationship. You could still care about that person, but want help. There's no way to do it seamlessly.
Right.
And we just don't know a better way yet. If the person being abused isn't seeking help, then they're not going to get it. And it's important to get the message out there that there are resources available. It's not going to be easy, and it takes a great deal of courage and strength to do such a thing. But if somebody is being abused, it won't just end one day. Statistically, that is highly improbable. You have to get help. You have to talk to the police. Whether you do it clandestinely or you just show up and say, hey, I'm being abused, in whatever way that you are, it has to get done. Someone has to say it. If you know somebody that's being abused, maybe you're the person that goes to say it. But either way, there's no way it just ends. Somebody has to say something.
Yeah.
It's just an unfortunate way that the legal system works.
And you're right. Statistically, if you're being abused, just assume that I'm saying this right now, it's not going to ever get better. It's not ever going to change. This person is not going to magically find Jesus or something. I hope that happens. And it does happen in a very rare form. But most people assume that they are going to be a part of that minority of people who do find someone that changes, and not the actual part that becomes a statistic.
Yeah.
And you will end up a part of a statistic if you stay in a abusive relationship, because people aren't going to change. And Mike's correct. There are ways that you can go around these, kind of navigate through here. It's difficult, but that's where I think we need to make sure that if you see one of those victim advocacy groups out there that are collecting donations or doing something like that, it's for the displacement of people who come out of abusive relationships.
Yeah.
It's to help them get apartments. It's to help them find jobs if they're stay-at-home moms. It's to help them get along and get back on their feet, because they're going to have to uproot and leave everything that they know.
No matter which way it goes, it's ending a relationship, and that takes effort and money.
Yeah. So we need to make sure that we're supporting those groups, and also, any way we can. And like you said, hopefully after doing this for years and years and years the same way, hopefully sometime soon something changes and they find a better way, because obviously it's not working.
It doesn't work. It's a very clunky, slow system, but it is the only one we have right now. And what I can tell you, that after this case, I know, and I believe that Nikki was being abused. She didn't see a way out. She took care of it the only way she knew she'd get the result. The threat was over. And I'm glad to hear that eventually her sentence was reduced, because that tells you one thing, people. The evidence was there to show that she was a victim and survivor of abuse, and the court system saw that. That's very important. So it doesn't matter whose side you're on. That evidence is there, and people saw it. Her sentence was reduced, and hopefully she's going to get out and transition back into a normal life and have her kids back, and have the best luck going forward and putting this all behind them.
Yeah. I hope that all works out for her. And I know that like I said, some people may be on the other side and say, no, she deserves to be in prison, but that's our point of view, and that's the perspective that we're giving you. And I know that I kind of struggled through a lot of things in here, but especially, I think, kind of lightening the mood up before we close this thing out. We were talking the other day, and one of my buddies messaged me about some of my pronunciation of words, just kind of giving me a hard time. And what I told him was, I'm not mispronouncing words. That's just my West Texas vernacular. So if you hear anything in there, that's not, I'm not claiming that I'm doing it. That's just the way I talk. That's my West Texas vernacular. Also, very good album by John Bauman.
Oh, nice. Thank you. I'm not yelling. It's just the way I talk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, anyways, I think that this was kind of more of a serious conversation, more kind of in-depth and a little bit dark. And so I think that for this week, I think we'll probably just leave it there. What do you think? You got anything else you want to cover?
I sure don't. I think I've got it all out there.
All right, everybody. We will talk to you guys again soon. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening to the episode. We really appreciate it. The numbers are going up, the downloads are going up, and we cannot thank you guys enough. If you guys are looking for us on any of the social media platforms, we are available on at least 3. If you're looking for us on Facebook, we're at The Murder Project. If you need to search for us, we are at facebook.com/podcasttmp. If you're looking for us over on the Instagrams, we are at The Murder Projects. And if you need to find us on the old Twitter machine, we are at The Murder Pod. Also, remember, if you need to send us an email, if you have a longer form question or anything like that, we have an email address if someone ever wants to use it. It is contact@themurderproject.com. And as always, Mike, myself, or both of us will respond to any of those questions.
Sure will.
Also, don't forget, whatever platform you're listening to us on, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Please tell your friends, tell your families, tell anybody that you can about The Murder Project. We would appreciate it. And if you're listening on Apple, hit that subscribe button, leave us a review, hit that 5 stars.
All 5 of them.
Please, and thank you. We do appreciate it. We thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening to us this week. We can't wait to get another episode together and bring it to you. So we will talk to you guys soon. But before we go, please remember,
head up, eyes up,
and stay alive.